Can you write a standalone story in 24 pages with a beginning, middle, and end? Most people can't, and it is a lot harder than it seems. So today, we're going to study an issue that does exactly that and figure out how they did it. Hi, I am writer and artist Dan Finley, and this is The Story Grind, a show where we study storytelling so we can become better storytellers. On today's episode, we're examining issue 1 of The Silver Coin, a horror comic from Image Comics. If you like getting into the weeds on the craft of storytelling and trying to get better at it, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon below. Alright, so here is the log line for The Silver Coin. It's kind of a strange one. Eisner-winning artist Michael Walsh teams with an all-star lineup of collaborators. Chip Zdarsky, Kelly Thompson, Ed Brisson, and Jeff Lemire on a new horror anthology miniseries for mature readers. Each issue will tell a tale of terror and a shared supernatural world. The story starts in 1978 with a failing rock band whose fortune suddenly changes when they find the mysterious silver coin. Little do they know that the fame comes with a cost, and a curse is always hungry. A lot of name dropping in that logline with well-established writers. I think you have a high-caliber series of writers working on the series, and that's your lead, so why not put that forward? I do think it's strange that they set up their first issue which we're going to look at today, but they didn't set up the overall theme of the series. All right, so here is the creative team behind the first issue. So something they do that's really interesting in the series is that the artist stays the same, but different writers come in and write single issue stories, independent of all the other issues. So the only through line is the silver coin, which passes from issue to issue. I love that idea, and I really enjoyed the first 6 issues so far, and I believe the series goes up to issue 15. So this is a big reason why I wanted to study this issue, because I'm writing my own single issue horror story in a shared world, and what better way to improve than studying what has come before? So let's dive into the silver coin and see what we can learn. Here we go. Scene 1, 2 pages long. It's 1978. 3 people are performing on a stage to an empty bar. Ryan, the lead singer, is upset that they're not getting a better time slot, but rock and roll is getting pushed out and disco is coming in. None of the band members are actually happy about this either. So a few things I like on this page. I'm not a big fan of musical lyrics in comics or novels for some reason, but I do like how it's done here. The text treatment is very different and it's large, which matches the amplified voice. Also, I like how the hand breaks panel too. It makes the moment feel much bigger and makes me think of a bigger finish to the song. There's also this great moment where the bartender is cheering, but the main singer looks upset. Then we reverse angle to see that the bar is actually empty. This is a great reveal. This already tells us so much about this band and where they're at in their careers. All done in 1 page, very tight. Scene 2, 4 pages long. The band hangs out and drinks, discovering an old coin in a box of junk that belonged to Ryan's mother. She apparently has left their family and abandoned them, and this is just sort of all the junk she left behind that's about to be thrown away. So this is the silver coin from the title of the story. Ryan says in a caption box, "I wanted more. Winners want more. I was tired of being a loser. We're too young to feel like relics." The band practices, but Ryan can't find a pick, so he ends up using the silver coin instead. His performance with the coin is so good it shocks the other bandmates. Ryan narrates, "It was the most beautiful sound we'd ever heard. It was magic." So this is the inciting incident of the story. It alters the character's ordinary world and pushes them into a new trajectory. This happens on page 5 of a 24-page story. So I want to point out that when you're writing a single issue story that's contained to 24 pages, you really need to hit that inciting incident early. In the past, we've seen some issues hit that inciting incident around page 1 or 2. This one just happens to hit on page 5. So there's some leeway there where the inciting incident happens. Ultimately, it's up to your personal story, but it does need to happen pretty quickly. Not at the midpoint, not towards the end, but I would say within the first 5 pages, in my personal opinion, is a really great place to put an inciting incident. So the band sits down and realizes that this magic coin is their ticket to success and going to use it for all it's worth. So we've had a setup where the band is playing to an empty room and they feel like has-beens, only to discover this coin that will propel them to success. It's a really nice, tight setup in 2 scenes, or 6 pages. This is the beginning of Act 2. The characters have made a choice. Ryan ends the scene with the narration, "We're all in." Our first gig after that made 3 people in the room cheer and weep, including Danny, who is the bartender. Side note, this little narration helped give the story a really nice time skip. We didn't have to have a scene where we saw the 3 people in the room cheering and watching the eventual build-up. It's a one-issue story. Nobody has time for that. So with a simple sentence, we did some heavy lifting. That's the power of narration and why it's great for short stories. So here are some of the things I really liked in this scene. Again, take a look at how music is being portrayed in these panels. Lots of sound effects letters around silhouettes, large font, really fun stuff. No musical notes, which surprises me. I really like that choice, and I'm kind of curious as to why they went in that direction, because that's going to change in a little bit in a few pages, so just keep an eye out for that. So another thing I really like is the close-up of the hand and the coin. The coin has an eye on it, and the finger is ripped and bleeding. This is some nice foreshadowing. Nothing good will come from using this coin. Notice how there are 3 locations in the scene, but it's still one scene because it's all about the band's discovery of this coin. Locations don't necessarily define a scene. This can be subjective, of course, but I feel pretty solid in saying that these 4 pages are a scene. Okay, scene 3, 3 pages long. The band performs in front of a packed crowd. After the performance, Danny the bartender says he loves their new sound. He tells Ryan that the disco cover band that plays after them is looking for a guitarist, but Ryan turns it down because disco is beneath him. Still, the bartender liked Ryan's playing so much that he's invited an old friend from a record label to listen in next week. The band is ecstatic because they know they're going to be signed to a label, and Ryan's drive for success creates a small rift with the band. They want to take it slow, but he's ambitious and he wants to get out of their small town as fast as he can. So scene 4, 3 pages long. Ryan lays in bed practicing and singing to himself when his father walks into his room. His father recognizes the coin Ryan is using. It's his mom's lucky coin, and the father is surprised that she didn't take it with her when she left. The father says he'll give it back to her, but Ryan snatches it out of his hand, still upset that she left them. He thinks his father is weak and that maybe the coin helped his mom escape, just like it will help him escape. Ryan removes the band-aid from his finger and blood drips onto the coin. The eye on the coin opens again. We get this great shot of Ryan's eye matching the coin's eye. I really love that visual. It's so great. So, side note, notice that the musical notes appear in word balloons here, when Ryan is singing and practicing to himself. I think without that, it might look like he's talking to himself. I'm curious why they didn't include the musical notes when they performed, but it's an interesting choice to have the musical notes sort of in this more quiet moment versus a performance moment on stage in front of a crowd. Scene 5, 3 pages long. The band performs at the bar, and the label rep stands out in the crowd. Ryan criticizes his bandmates playing, creating an even bigger rift between them. Ryan thinks they're bringing him down because they can't play as well as him. Of course, Ryan has this sort of magic coin that's making him better, but it's inflating his ego. Danny, the bartender, pulls Ryan to the side and introduces him to the guy from the label. The label rep likes their music, but the trend is now disco, and he wouldn't sign them unless they changed their sound. Ryan is pissed, insults the rep, and storms off. Ryan tells the band that the only way they're going to make it is to play disco, but his bandmates don't want to play disco. He says he'll sit in with the disco band that wanted him earlier. I get the impression that the band is broken up, and Ryan is willing to do whatever it takes to get out of this town. Strange that he didn't accept the rep's offer to go disco, though. Alright, scene 6, 5 pages long. Now Ryan plays with the disco group on stage. His narration says, "We were meant for bigger things. At least I thought we were. Turns out it's just me. So now here I am playing the game, giving people what they want so I can finally get what I want." Ryan plays with the band and people are dancing. We get this great distorted image for Ryan on the guitar. There's something interesting going on with the narration box here. Ryan is talking, but the text distorts in the caption box. I don't think I've ever seen it done that way before. That's actually really fun. Ryan is playing and his fingers are getting shredded, blood all over the guitar. He says he can't stop playing. People are staring at him. Ryan looks terrified. Someone drops a cigarette. We get the strange eye in Ryan's face again. Fires spread and engulf the basis. The flames consume everyone, but they keep playing and the crowd keeps dancing as if they don't notice the fire at all. We finish off the scene with this great image of Ryan playing while on fire. He just can't stop. All right. Scene 7, epilogue, 2 pages. Firefighters are at the scene long after the fire has gone out. They comment on how nobody was trying to leave while the fire was going on, and they don't understand why. One of the firefighters likes to pick through the scene and find things. In a splash page, he finds a burnt hand holding a coin, and now the coin will pass on to someone else, creating its own monkey's paw story. And that's it for issue 1. So let's take a 10,000 foot view of the story. But first, the Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. Get one of my digital mini comics for free when you join the newsletter and get monthly updates on my writing journey. If you want to see more of my work, check out my novels on Amazon and my comics on Gumroad. Links are below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot, especially to a small channel like this. All right, let's take a 10,000 foot view of the story. And I'm going to do something a little bit new here, which is almost like more of a play-by-play sports event type of thing, where I'm actually gonna mark on the screen. Hopefully that's bright enough for everybody. But all right, here we go. So as we can see, we have a total of 7 scenes in this 24-page story, and scene 6 is the largest and longest of these scenes. So and if we remember, that is actually the climactic moment where Ryan is playing his guitar and he can't stop playing and the entire bar burns down. But let's look at this very first page, page 1 in the story. Now remember, we sort of open up with them performing on the bar, or not on the bar, but in the bar, on stage, and then we have them like sort of have this huge finish, and then only the bartender is cheering for them. And then the camera kind of flips around and we see that the entire bar is empty. And I think that's really important that it's happening in just this very first page, because think about how those themes really set up the rest of this story. In fact, I think this is such an important moment, because if you look at this very first moment and you compare it to the this final scene here, notice how they are completely polar opposites of each other. We have Ryan and his band, who have no audience, versus Ryan performing in front of a huge crowd to the point that he can't even stop, to the point that the crowd is like entranced with his performance. And so we've established the theme up front here that, he has ambition. He wants to perform in front of people. He thinks he's sort of a wasted talent. And we have other genres kind of coming into his scene, like disco, that are sort of pushing him out. So I think that's really important. I mean, we can kind of get rid of, we can just kind of forget the epilogue here. So really the whole story is scenes 1 to scene 6. I mean, scene 7 really ends up being just kind of like a little bit of an end cap, which, tells us that the coin is moving to a different story or a different person, and will create its own another story for it. So this is great. This is like the arc of the entire story from scene 1 to scene 6. And I think that's really important with a standalone 24-page issue story. Set up your themes right away, and then make sure you resolve those in positive or negative ways. Now think about it. If this were not a horror story and this were a happy story, Ryan would be here performing in front of a huge crowd, and the place wouldn't burn down and he wouldn't be cursed with this coin. So those are sort of the two polar opposites. It can either kind of go either positive or negative from this starting point. So we end up seeing, of course, because it's a horror story, it ends up going negative. But yeah, so we've established our themes. I think this is very important. And the fact that the creative team has established this theme on the first page is absolutely amazing. It does show like how skilled they are, and there's a reason why they are some of the better known writers in the industry. I think that's also what's also great about scene 1 is they are setting up sort of these themes of Ryan's character, more of like his ideas of disco and how he hates disco, because he's performing to an empty room, but the disco band after him sells out the house. So it's very a point of frustration for him. But at the same time, at the end of the story here, he's playing disco. That's a very important thing to look at, because we have sort of a character that is his character arc. Well, a part of it, anyways. He's going from I don't want to say integrity or morals, but he has his own personal musical tastes at the beginning of the story, and by the end of the story, he's completely corrupted them, and he doesn't care about them anymore because his ambition is driving him, and he wants to play. He's willing to play disco as long as it'll make him famous and get him out of this town. So here we go. In scene 2 is where they actually discover the coin. That is their inciting incident that drives the entire story, or I should say, throws their ordinary world out of balance. In fact, they don't even sort of realize it yet. They've just discovered the coin, but it actually doesn't happen until the next page, where they perform with it and they realize, oh, wow, this coin is on a certain level magic, and it's just helping us become a better band. But again, as soon as, actually, let me backtrack. That actually doesn't happen on the next page. It actually happens right here, if we are going in this direction. So we actually get also a little preview. It's not only that he just gets better at performing, but we get to see that his finger gets cut up as well as he's performing, and his finger bleeds onto the coin as well. So we get sort of the benefit as well as the curse sort of summarized in the last panel on this page, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, page 5. From scene 2 to 3, we have a little narration that helps us skip through time, and tells us that, yes, they performed in front of a very small group of people, and they were amazing, and they made people cry, and so we kind of did a little bit of a time skip, which is really brilliant, especially for a very short story like this. Actually, this isn't the only time it's going to happen. It's going to happen a little bit later, which I didn't mention in my initial analysis. Okay, so in scene 3, we see actually the band kind of come to a disagreement. Ryan wants to get out of the town. He's not satisfied with second place. And he says, we're not even second place, we are dead last. So we kind of get that insight into his ambition in this scene. And Ryan ends up walking off away from the band, and he says, don't be so scared of success. So again, sort of his ambition is driving him, and maybe it's not even his ambition, it might be influenced by the coin itself. All right, scene 4 is when they do when he's practicing by himself, and we get a little bit more information on his mother and how she's left, and she left the coin behind, and how the father thinks he's going to give it back to the mother, but Ryan says no, he's going to essentially keep it and try to escape just like she did. Again, we get a little bit of insight into how the coin is sort of like wounding him as he does practice, and he's got like he takes a Band-Aid off his finger, and the blood sort of drips into the coin's eye. And in scene 5 is when they perform in front of the record label executive. Now, what's really interesting about this, and I mentioned this in the initial analysis, was that it's sort of surprising that the executive offers him essentially a chance to go disco, but Ryan insults him and refuses and storms off. And essentially, in the very next moment, he goes to his bandmates and says, all right, we're going to play disco because that's the only way to get out of this town. Sort of a very strange choice, like I said initially, but I've been thinking about this, and I realized that I think it's sort of the creative team has sort of written themselves into a corner in this situation, because what other option do you have? I mean, if he sits there and says, if he wants to fulfill his ambition, and he goes to the record executive and he says, yes, okay, I will do disco. The problem with that is you're really close to the end of your story here. I mean, you've only got 2 more scenes left to go. And if Brian says, yes, I will sign with your label and play disco, that's a much longer story, right? You can't really write that in short 24-page stories. So Ryan's choice here really sort of motivates the plot. So it does feel a little bit forced. I wish there was sort of like a more finessed way to have executed that. But at the same time, I understand that it sort of helps move the story forward a little bit better. It's a strange character choice. It doesn't really feel organic, but it does move the story. And sometimes you kind of have to go with the lesser of two evils with storytelling. And hopefully it's not too obvious, or I should say it doesn't break. Hopefully it doesn't break the suspension of disbelief within the story itself. I think in this situation it's fine. It's sort of a strange move, but I off the top of my head I couldn't really think of an alternate route. So do what you got to do, right? So here we go. And scene 6 is the final climactic scene. Ryan's ambitions are fulfilled. He's on stage with the disco group that is super successful in his own small little town, and he's playing with them to a crowded room, a packed room of people who love disco. Again, the complete opposite from the beginning of our story. And I think when it comes to storytelling, you're really dealing with arcs. Sort of the positives and the negatives. I think if you look at most stories, you'll see that the end of the story usually ends up an opposite of the beginning of the story. But in that process, a character has either learned or grown, or in this case, the character hasn't learned and grown, and essentially it's a part of his demise. His ego has inflated, and essentially he crashes and literally burns along with the band and everyone else in the room. So very, very tight writing, very well paced, a great story about ambition and sort of the drive to find a way to improve your life or find something greater, and to kind of abandon that sort of small town life, which I could definitely empathize with. So the second issue goes on to show another story with the silver coin, but it's not a continuation of the firefighter who actually picked it up. In fact, we just skip his story entirely. The next issue is a completely different writer, and they take a very different route with the coin, which is also really interesting. But again, pretty much every story that in the series is pretty much, again, that horror trope of the monkey's paw. And if you're not familiar with it, essentially you find some kind of object that fulfills your wish, but at the same time curses you and sort of makes your life worse. So it's sort of this like wish fulfillment, but at the same time you get cursed, or your life is ruined by this wish fulfillment. So it's like kind of a careful what you wish for type of story, and it happens a lot in the horror story genre. So personally, I've only read up to the first 6 issues of this series, and it goes up to issue 15. So I can tell you that around, I think actually in issue 6, they actually explain the whole history of the silver coin, sort of where it came from, where it started. And I'll have to say that I find it a little disappointing, because I think that is such a great mystery that you could have like held on to that a little bit later in the series. But at the same time, I understand it, because 6 issues seems to be sort of the standard, like where we don't know if it's not a successful series, then we kind of end it at issue 6. And it seems like maybe they weren't sure if the series was going to continue further. But again, they went up to issue 15. I would have loved to have seen that like maybe held off until a later issue. But, you know, you got to work with the circumstances you have. But it's I'm not going to give it away, but it's definitely worth a read. I really enjoyed a lot of these issues, and I can't wait to read the next few issues. So I think one of the things that we really need to look at here that's going to help us as we continue to write our own stories is that your inciting incident needs to come really early for a single issue story. You don't really have a lot of time, which is it's pretty amazing that they were able to pull off what they did within this 24 pages. So again, inciting incident at page 5, and then we see some character development as Ryan. His ambition takes over, his ego takes over. He ends up with personal conflict. So we have that internal conflict, which is his desire. We have that personal conflict, which is that struggle against bandmates, as well as record labels, as well as like a bartender. because nobody's sort of fulfilling his inner desire. And then we have that overall objective, which is we have this sort of silver coin that has cursed him in a way, has improved his music, but has ultimately cursed him and destroys his life. And we can imagine, which another sort of like little subtext there is that we can imagine that this coin also destroyed his mom's life, and that she's no longer around. We can imagine that this coin did something to her as well, and maybe she didn't actually leave the family, but maybe something happened to her. I haven't read the later issues yet, but I would love to kind of see that story, a story focused on that mother. I wonder if they're going to come back to that. That would be a lot of fun. Also, another story focused on that firefighter. See, there's so many, when you have a setup like this, there's so many opportunities to tell really interesting stories. But again, 24-page story, one-issue story, very challenging, very hard to pull off with a beginning, middle, and satisfying end. Personally, I really love this story. Really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the next 5 stories as well, and I can't wait to read the rest of it. So what did you think about the silver coin? Let me know in the comments below. Again, I am writer and artist Dan Finley, and that's it for this episode of The Story Grind. Before we go, I actually want to point out that I'm starting to do some live streams on some of my own comic making right now. Just kind of having fun. It's my first time trying it. Just spending an hour or two drawing, and you get to hear me blabber throughout the whole thing. But I also do give some tips once in a while as I stumble upon them. But you can also sort of see the frustrations I encounter as I draw this comic that I've also written. Another thing I'm starting to do is a behind the scenes series where I kind of do like a little accountability check-in about the progress that I've made for that week. So definitely check out some of those videos. You're going to see a lot more of those in the feed. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon and share it with your friends. Let other people know. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next episode. Take care.